Hello, this is Greg Crawford coming to you today with Militant Grace and sharing with you victory for today's living. I'm glad that you joined me on my podcast, and I hope that you'll stick around a little while for some word that I'm going to be sharing with you. And I just want to encourage you to bookmark my podcast site here and come back often. We're going to be adding new content. We're going to be putting some new messages up here and some music and a few other things. So I hope that you'll come back from time to time and enjoy our podcast. And if you'll just click the subscribe button so that you'll never miss something new that we put up here. Thank you again for joining us today. And now we're going to take you into a service already in progress. Well, welcome back today. I appreciate you joining me on the program. We're going to get right into this very shortly here. We've come up with 21 broadcasts now, I think, and we're up at the very beginning of chapter 5 of Hebrews. So we've gone through 4 chapters and about 20 programs. So we're getting there. But I just want to take time. I'm not in no hurry. I just really want to take my time and slowly walk through the book of Hebrews and bring you, at least my understanding of the book. I mean, you're more than welcome to create, and believe your own understanding, but I'm just showing you what I see in this, and I hope it has a way of, causing you to look at things, number one, maybe a little different. Number 2, maybe with a little more insight, or maybe you're right there and this is just confirmation for you, and I hope so. But before I get to it today, I want to take about 2 minutes and I just want to bring you up to where we are. If you remember the very first program, we started out with who, what, when, why, of Hebrews. Who, what, when, where, and why. The 5 W's that I use, that journalists use when they do a story. So I want to revisit that for a minute, just as we're coming up here on chapter 5. Remember, Hebrews is a transitional book. It's a covenantal book. It is a book that is taking the church and explaining it from the old covenant to the new covenant. And we talked about that, I think on the second program, we talked about the last days of what? And, and it said right there in verse 2 of Hebrews 1, God who at sundry times and divers manners spoke to us by his holy prophets and holy apostles and prophets, hath in these last days. Well, people try to take that and make it the last days of where we are in 2024 right now. But that's not what they were talking about. It was the last days then in AD 65 when this book was written, 65 or 66 along in there somewhere. The last days of the world? No, it was the last days of the old covenant. And I'll get to that in just a second. So therefore, what I want to do is I want to go back to this who, what, when, where, why of that Hebrews was written. Okay, so let's start with number 1, who. Who was it written to? Well, it tells you in the title, Hebrews. It was written to the Jews. And for the most part, it was written to the Christian Jews, the ones who had forsaken Judaism and had espoused Christianity. And that made up the biggest majority of the church back in the early days of the church. It was mostly Jewish. There was 3,000 Jews that got saved on the day of Pentecost. That wasn't Romans. That wasn't, Germans or Egyptians. It was Jews. And, so the entire church was made up of the apostles and the Jewish converts. So it was written to them. That's the who. The what. What was it saying? It was trying to show them that they didn't need to go back. Paul wrote to, Timothy or Titus, one of the two of them, that there was going to be a great falling away. Well, there was a great falling away during this time. And, and I said back then when I covered this, I'm not going to judge these people. I've been persecuted because of what I believe, but I've never been in fear of my life. It's just always been, people talking about you or running your name down or not letting you in their church or something. But that's stuff you can survive, you know. That's not something that you've got to worry about as far as somebody going to throw you in a den with lions in it, or somebody's going to burn you at the stake, or somebody's going to crucify you. And that's what these people had to put up with back then. And so, you know, I'm not going to judge them, and I'll let God be their judge and let God, be the one that decides their end, because I can't, you know. And that's what one of the purposes of this book on the Watt side was, to get them to stay in what they were in. Don't go back. You know, this was the key word to the book of Hebrews was better. It was better blood. It was a better priesthood. It was a better covenant. It was better everything. Everything was better. Better sacrifices. It was, you know, a better high priest. It was a better this, a better that. Sometimes it would say something like a more excellent ministry. Well, that's just another synonym for better, you know. And Paul was trying to, and I believe Paul wrote the book, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But anyway, I believe he was saying, don't go back. Don't let nobody pull you back into that. And when you get up to around Hebrews 10, he'll tell you that. He says, if you go back, there remains no more sacrifice for sin. Well, of course, because Jesus was a better sacrifice than bulls and goats. So once Jesus' blood was shed, the blood of bulls and goats was no longer accepted by God. So if you left Christianity and you went back into Judaism, then the only sacrifice that you could offer was a bull and a goat, and God didn't accept that anymore. So you couldn't get forgiveness for sins. The only way you could was to come back to Christianity. So that was a lot about what this book was about. That's the what. When? Well, it was written somewhere in the middle 60s AD, about 5 years or so before Jerusalem was completely destroyed and annihilated. And like I've told you before, Jerusalem was burned to the ground. The temple was destroyed. The only thing that was left, the temple was completely destroyed. It was plowed under like a field. Jesus had told them in Matthew 24 that there wouldn't be one stone left upon another. Well, that prophecy came to pass. And so this was fixing to happen in about 5 years. And Paul was imploring the Jewish Christians, and, you know, don't go back. He was imploring the Gentile Christians, don't listen to these Judaizers that try to get you to add Judaism to your Christianity. Because in 5 short years, or maybe even a couple of less than that, Judaism was going to end. And it was going to be 200 years before Judaism made any kind of comeback in the world. And it's still in the world today now, you know, since it's made its comeback. But it is just a sad picture of what it was. There's no sacrifice. There's no atonement. You know, they call it Yom Kippur, but it don't mean nothing. There's no bloodshed. And the Bible said without the shedding of blood, there's no remission of sins. And the Bible also says that Jesus is the only blood that can be shed. And so Paul was preparing them for the loss of the law, for the loss of the sacrifices, the priesthood. Every single priest was murdered by Rome in AD 70. Not one was left alive. The high priest, all the way down to all of the Levite priests that were there, was destroyed. Everything was stolen out of the temple, melted down. It just didn't exist anymore. And so that's what this book is about. Who, what, when. Okay? Who, what, when, where. It was written, I think it was written by Paul. You know, there's a lot of people that agree with me, and there's a lot of people who don't agree with me. I just think Paul had the revelation that rolls all this stuff out, for one thing. And I believe he might have done it incognito, because he didn't have the greatest of reputations with the Hebrews. And, so he could have tried to do it undercover or whatever. But, he talks about Timothy at the end, which, he's very close to Timothy. So that's kind of the way I believe it. It was written from Rome, and it went first to the Roman Jews, and then it went from there out into the whole world. Who, what, when, where, and then the last one would be why. And I've covered it already a little bit. The why was he knew Jerusalem was going to be destroyed. The Jewish people were going to be lost, and he was trying to show them that there was a remedy. There was a remedy that he was giving them right now, and that was the new covenant. It was what Jesus established. And all through this book, and we're fixing to get into it here pretty quick. I'm starting chapter 5 right now, but when we get over to chapters 8, it talks about a better covenant with a better hope. We get into chapter 9, it talks about, a better priesthood again, and a better testament, and a New Testament, and the blood that was shed. Chapter 10 covers that again. So we're going to get into this quite a bit in the next 10 or 12 episodes. But that's why I wanted to stop here on the program today and just kind of bring you up to date. So the final thing is why. And this why was to give them something to hold on to when he knew what was about to happen in Jerusalem. And this was going to bring in the fullness of Matthew 24. And it's one of these subsequent series I'm going to do one on Matthew 24. And I'm going to prove to you that it actually happened in AD 70. But I don't want to get into that right now, but we'll get into it later. But the why of this, like I'm saying, is to prepare the people for the loss of the first covenant, because this was the last days of the first covenant. And when you go through the New Testament, you listen to Peter, you listen to John, you listen to Paul, you listen to James, every one of them talked about these are the last times, in these last days. For we know that the end is upon us. Over and over and over they talked about it. The last days of what? The Old Covenant. The end of what? The Old Covenant. What's upon us? The beginning of the New Covenant. And from AD 30, from the time that Jesus was crucified and to the time that he was resurrected, from the time that he was crucified and resurrected until AD 70, that was 40 years. And Jesus prophesied, this generation will not pass away till all these things be fulfilled. Well, that was a generation is 40 years. So Paul knew that this was about to happen, and he was quite frankly preparing them for this. And that's why that we started going to all these better things. So I hope that brings you up to date to a little bit. I'm not going to have a lot of time now to get into chapter 5, but when I come back on the next program, we'll jump straight into it. I want you to know, we're fixed to talk about a better high priest. That's what chapter 5 is about, or the biggest majority of it. That's what it's about. And I'm going to talk to you how that Jesus was chosen by the order of Melchizedek, the same way that Aaron and the Levitical priesthood was chosen by Aaron. And then, the earthly priesthood was called the Levitical priesthood. The heavenly priesthood was called the Melchizedek priesthood. And we're going to get into all of that. And when we get into chapter 7, we're going to get into Melchizedek, of who he was and where he came from and all that. But this is bringing you up to date here after about 21 programs and to where we are. And maybe you hadn't listened to some of the early ones, or maybe this will make you hungry to go back and listen to some of the early ones as well. I hope you do that. I want to say that I really appreciate those of you that are tuning in and listening to this teaching on the book of Hebrews. It's a tremendous blessing for me to be able to do it for you. I just want to ask you, we're in need of your support right now. Here in these summer months, the typical support for ministers go down. And I would really like to ask you if you could send an offering. It would be greatly appreciated. I have several ways you can do it. If you're a web person and an internet person, you can use an app called Cash App. And if you use Cash App, you'll recognize this address as the format that it uses. It's $TVM Now. TVM Now. $TVM Now. And you can, whatever you can, and I'll get your offering within minutes. If you use PayPal, my PayPal address is gc911@bellsouth.net. One more time, gc911@bellsouth.net. And then if you still use a stamp and a letter, that's fine too. I have a lot of people that send us offerings in the mail, and I appreciate them. My mailing address is TVM, that's Total Victory Ministries, and Post Office Box 2382, Valdosta, Georgia, 31604. Once again, TVM, Post Office Box 2382, Valdosta, Georgia, 31604. Pam and I appreciate you very much. Thank you for tuning in today. I hope it's become a blessing to you to bring you up to date a little bit. Tune in next time, and we're going to jump right into Hebrews chapter 5. God bless you. I love you with all my heart, and we'll talk to you next time.